Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. We often are in ticklish situations where we can't figure out what to say. So I want to take a shot at some common of those ticklish situations and share what comes to mind as to what I would say. Of course, every situation is different, and you'll want to probably just pull some nuggets from this and adapt it to you. Um, I want to start with with the with politics because we are so polarized now, and so most people just say I'm not even going to talk politics. So I'm going to I'm going to pretend that I hate Donald Trump, and talking with somebody who loves Donald Trump, and how I might try to begin a conversation. I might say something like, I can understand why you like Donald Trump. We've had a reputation of being a paper tiger where we draw lines in the sand and that we say can't be crossed, but then when they cross it, we let it go. And so there may be a need for a strong leader and even somebody who's unpredictable. When somebody's unpredictable, as Trump is, you're more scared of him and is he going to push the button? And on domestic scene, there's an understandable reason to be scared of illegal immigration that's uncontrolled, because the former carpenter or irrigation guy or landscaper who was making $25 an hour and could afford to support their family, now because of the influx of many illegal immigrants who are willing to work for $10 or $15 an hour under the table. The average pay for those folks are down to $15 an hour, and a legal resident of any race, of course, can't do it. So I can certainly understand why somebody might want to support Donald Trump. On the other hand, there are a lot of reasons not to. His loose cannon personality, his former bad sexual behavior, there was no collusion, I don't believe. I think the Mueller report says that, and whatever obstruction is relatively minor compared to focusing on the major issues. But more important, his unpredictability leads to lack of respect from other leaders. His insistence on tariffs is something that left and right both agree are not effective. They end up being an extra tax on the American public. So those are some of my thoughts, but I'm interested in what do you think? Right, so without capitulating and merely, agreeing with what he's saying or avoiding the conversation, I've said my piece, but first I preempted, I wanted him to understand that I acknowledged his position, and then ended with what J.W. Marriott said are the most powerful words in the English language. What do you think? Okay, very common ticklish situation. Let's turn to career issues. Very common ticklish situation, whether you're on the job or looking for a job, is they ask you, how much are you looking to make? What are your salary requirements? Couple of possibilities. One is to say, throw it back and say, well, what is the range you've budgeted for the position? That avoids your lowballing yourself or pricing yourself so high that they're no interested in you. The other approach is to say, I've assembled a list of comparables, and in light of what I've done, and more importantly, what I'll be doing in the next 3 months, it would seem that instead of my current salary of 75, 95 would be appropriate. What do you think? Again, what do you think? That 95 should be at the high side of fair, not outrageous, but not just average, so you have some room to negotiate. That's how I do that. Let's say somebody needs to improve, and let's say their writing is bad, and you're their boss or even their coworker. You might say something like, I'm wondering whether it might be helpful for me to share a few thoughts on how how this press release, and say how you could be better, how this press release might be more effective. And would you prefer that I simply review it using the Microsoft Word track changes feature and send it to you for consideration? Or would you like to go over it line by line? Giving people two choices gives them a sense of agency and power. And then I would also, by the way, end with the what do you think? Those really are powerful words. Okay, let's say I have to fire somebody. Because firing is so broad, and there are many bases on which an employee can claim that the termination was unfair, rather than the usual HR suggested procedure, which is, give them an improvement, put them on an improvement plan, another improvement plan, and etc. That tends to create a really oppositional mindset. Usually within the first hour or day, you can tell if you've made a bad mistake in hiring and the person's no good for the job. So rather than start the improvement plan business, which really does, set the stage for these very stressful confrontations, especially if the person ends up claiming that the reason is racism, sexism, whatever, hostile environment, sexual harassment, would be to what I metaphorically call getting on the same side of the table as they are, and saying, I'm getting a sense early on here that this job isn't a great fit. For example, you seem to be really good at the social aspects of the job, but there's a lot of intellectually demanding solo work that needs to be done, and I'm looking at the quality, and it's just doesn't seem to be playing to your strengths. I'm wondering if it might be a good idea for me to help you find a better fit job, either within the company or outside. What do you think? That's called counseling out, and it's that way you're both on the same side of the table, and it doesn't always work. Nothing always works. But I can tell you for sure that the improvement plan and firing approach, especially if it's a woman or a minority, so often leads to grievances, either internal grievances, lawsuits, filings with the EEOC. And even though 95% of the claims to the EEOC, as I recall, don't succeed, just going through the process of being called a racist, a sexist, a hostile environment, whatever, a sexual harasser, is so stressful and time-consuming and expensive, lawyers, that counseling out may be an option. Okay, now I want to turn to relationships. Let's start in the beginning of a relationship. You're on a first date, and then comes the check. What do you do? I like to think and again, I'm really in this era of, women have, power, and for the same work, women make the same as men. When you really compare truly full-time, 50-hour-a-week surgeons with 50-hour-a-week surgeons, women get paid the same, and in some cases more than men. So I'm going to treat men and women absolutely equally here. So when the check comes, these days most waiters put the check in the middle, not in front of the man. Whether you're a man or a woman, I would be pulling out my wallet, and then and then my credit card or cash, whatever, and assume I'm going to be splitting. Now, if the person insists on paying, that's okay once. If I were dating and somebody was insisting on you paying all the time, that's a little bit of a red flag. I think fairness is pretty important. But that's what I would do. Rather than, how should we do this? Should we split the check? I would simply pull out my wallet, start to pull out the credit card, and then assume it's going to be split, unless the person insists on paying. Okay. Next. Still in the dating scene. So often people complain that a person says, I'll call you, and then they don't call. Well, often, if they don't, they don't have the courage to say, I don't think we're really a good fit. So it's just simpler to lie. And it's terrible. Of course, it leaves the person hanging, especially if the other person likes that first person. So I don't think you should just take it, but I don't think you need to be too accusatory. If I had gone on a first date and the woman said she was going to call me, I would, and she said, implied she would call within the next few days, I'd wait, instead of few, I'd wait 5 days. And then I would pick up the phone, not text. I think I would pick up the phone. And I would say, gee, Mary, you said you'd be contacting me in a few days and you didn't. I'm wondering if that's because really you just don't think we're a good fit, and so you just didn't want to tell me that, or something else. Would you give me some candid feedback? I'd appreciate it, because I enjoyed our first date. That's how I do that. Okay, now we get to a really ticklish situation. You're in bed for the first time, and you're nervous. You're dating, and you're nervous. Is this person going to be HIV positive? Is he going to have chlamydia, transmitted disease? There's no, in my mind, I would simply ask, I would say, and I would acknowledge the difficulty. I'd say, I know this is a very awkward question, and I'm glad we're talking about it before we're totally hot and heavy, and so we can keep our heads about us a little bit. Do you want to tell me a little bit about how sure you are? Nobody's ever 100% sure. Rarely are somebody 100% sure. How sure are you that you don't have a sexually transmitted disease? And then I'd look them in the eye, because it's really hard for that person to be honest. And I would just ask. And it's easy for me to say here in the comfort and the even temperedness of my office here. But if I didn't like the answer, I would be picturing myself with that STD and how horrible that would be. And I would probably, urge, whether it be an HIV test or wearing a condom or whatever the situation, if I was a woman, whatever the situation was. And then I would have safer sex, whether it be kissing and hugging and hand touchings and things like that. So that's how I'd handle that. And let's say there was, you felt things were going to, you wanted intercourse, that, politely insisting on the condom, saying, I think we'll both be more relaxed and enjoy it more. I know it's not as much pleasure to wear a condom, but I need that for my peace of mind at this point. I'll help you put it on if you want, something like that. Okay, moving on in a relationship. Let's say the person is, a couple's getting along well, and of course these always apply to straight and gay. And these days I'm gonna have to say sexually fluid, where whatever your sexual proclivities are, predispositions, actions, whatever. Anyway, let's say you want to ask the person to move in with you, saying something like, I would probably lay out the good things. We have really gotten along beautifully, not just in bed, but out of bed. We seem to enjoy each other's company, even when we spend fairly long periods of time together, like when we went away for the weekend. We didn't have any fights. We got along really well. We seem to enjoy each other's company. We're both paying a lot of rent. It's really difficult and stressful to pay all that rent here in the San Francisco Bay Area, where the rents are bizarre. I would love to live with you, my dear. What do you think? Again, what do you think? So that's probably how I would do that. Let's say I wanted to say no to that. Again, I always would want to start with the positives. Things like, just like I did with that weak employee, when I said, you're really good at the social aspects of the job, and then I talked about the negative. That's the old sandwich technique. You start with the positive, you say the negative, and then you end up with something positive. So it sandwiches the bad with the good. So if I want to say no to a move-in request, I would say something like, you're right. We are having a great time, and I really want to continue our relationship. But I feel at this point it's a little premature, or maybe a lot premature. I'm not sure yet. I'd love to continue our relationship, but I don't think I'm ready to move in yet. I hope you understand. And I would give him or her the hug, a good hug and kiss, and maybe more than that. And that way I'm not forced into capitulating to what I'm not ready for. Marriage. It's the same thing. I would do exactly the same approach. Outline all the reasons why things are good, why I want to spend, not just live with you, but spend hopefully the rest of my life with you, even though half of couples divorce. But I'd use the same approach, so I don't need to say anything. And the same is true to the saying no to the marriage request. Now let's say you're in this long-term relationship, and now money is an issue, which is the most common thing couples fight about. And let's say one person is an excessive spender. Very ticklish, but you cannot let it go because it metastasizes. There's something called a hedonic treadmill. The spender gets a shopper's high, which lasts ever shorter and requires an ever bigger purchase to keep the shopper's high, and that can lead to enormous debt. And beyond a bare middle class living, shopping for non-essentials does not bring happiness. For example, the Mercedes versus the Toyota, or even the Lexus versus the Toyota, or the diamond versus the cubic zirconium, or the 5-star hotel versus the 3-star hotel, the fancy neighborhood versus the okay neighborhood, the 1,500 square feet versus 3,000 square feet. So I would probably couch it something like this. We all have stressful jobs these days. And I always feel like I have this enormous nut that I have to meet, with not just the mortgage, but if we look at our credit card bills, let me pull out the Visa bill, look at this, and look at this, and look at this. I'm under huge stress already, and I'm sure you are too. And if I'm feeling like I've got to earn all this money and, for example, get more commissions and sell more product, I feel ethical temptations. My stress level is up. And as you know, buying this stuff feels good for only a short amount of time, but the credit card bill and the interest, if we can't pay it all at one time, isn't fun. That doesn't go away. So I'm wondering if we can sit down and talk about what we want to do about our spending. And then I would start and ask the person, okay, what do you think again? And where possible, let the idea come from them. Okay, now let's say the tough topic is substance abuse. So let's make sure that I'm not doing anything screwed up here. No, I'm doing good. Oh, doing well. Okay, substance abuse. I would say something like, you know I love you very much. And this could also be true of a friend, or I care about you very much, or whatever it is. And this is very awkward for me even to bring up. It's always good to say that up front to acknowledge your feelings about it. But I've noticed that you are vaping almost every night, and I've even noticed you once vaping during the day. You know, I'm reading more and more about the effects on memory, even on psychosis, social anxiety, depression, and heart disease and cancer. And I'm seeing your motivation decrease. I'm nervous. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about your substance use. Now, I'm not going to say that starting that conversation like that's going to solve the problem. But that kind of loving-based, honest feedback with specificity is a great way to open the conversation, I believe. Okay, another ticklish situation is you think your partner's cheating. There's a very small percentage of couples who are fine with an open relationship, who are, living together, etc. And even there are these days, there are triads and quadrads, if that's a word, of people who live together and sleep with other people. But generally, people feel hurt when somebody's having sex with somebody other than their main squeeze, if you will. And it also puts the relationship at risk. It definitely decreases the commitment to work through the hard parts. Now, I know that there are some people who can simply have sport sex, and it has no effect on the relationship. But let's assume that it's the kind of thing that could be significant, and that you know that you really want to deal with it. Again, not always do you deal with. Sometimes the wise couple just shuts up. The wise person just shuts up. But let's assume you want to deal with it. I'd say something like, I know this is going to be a difficult conversation, and I can't be sure, and I know there'll be a real temptation to lie about it, but I have the strong sense that you're having an affair. You're just acting a little differently. I'm smelling something on your shirts that feels like another person. I worry that that's not just a quick fuck, but could threaten our relationship, our commitment to our relationship, STDs, everything else. And I'm wondering if you can be candid with me. Anyway, that's how I'd start. And finally, this may be redundant, but let's say the couple now wants to break up or divorce. I'd probably say something like this: the same model. We've been together for 6 years, and while every couple's sex, amount of sex decreases over time, they say that if you put a penny in a jar every time you have sex the first year, and then take a penny out every time you have sex after the first year, you'll never empty the jar. Our sex life has gone to crap. We're fighting more. You've gained a lot of weight. I'm not sexually attracted to you, and you say you want to lose weight, but you keep saying you will and you never do. And I just can't physically be attracted to somebody who's 40 pounds overweight. We're fighting about trivial things. You want kids, and I'm terrified of the at least 18-year commitment of time, restriction of freedom, and cost. So before we get too old, I'm wondering whether this is the time for us to ideally have an amicable divorce, not one of these 5-year knockdown dragouts with lawyers inflaming everything so they can get bigger fees. How do you feel about that? Let's just have a conversation about this. What do you think? So that's probably how I would do that. And the final category that I want to talk about is parenting. Let me just check again, make sure that everything is going all right here. Please be all right after all this work. Yeah, we're good. Okay, parenting. So a ticklish situation is always when your kid is saying why. And of course it's different. You know, why do I need to do this? Yeah, mainly why do I need to do this? It's going to be different if the kid is 3, 8, or 12 or whatever. So I'm going to try to do 3 different versions of what I would say to first to a 3-year-old. I would, let's say the kid doesn't want to come to the table on time, coming for dinner. Why? I want to finish my game. I'd probably say something like, you count, but so do we, and I've made dinner, and it's going to get cold, and you're a member of this family, so you have to come to the table. I'd probably do that. And would it be any different for an 8-year-old? No, probably pretty similar. I'd probably make it even a little simpler than that with a 3-year-old. Probably with a 3-year-old, depending upon the intelligence of the 3-year-old, there's enormous variation. I would say, it's dinner time, mommy and daddy are at the table, food is ready, sit down at the table, you have to do it. I might do that at 3. It's always providing a reason, but I've noticed I'm doing it crisply. I'm not going at great length and, making a big spiel about it. And let's say the kid is 12, maybe 14, 15, let's see and the kid says, I'll eat later. I'm going to send out for Domino's. I don't need to eat dinner. I'd probably say something like, I think one of the best things about families has, in many cases, gone by the wayside, which is family dinner. And while very often we can have a family dinner and nothing important gets discussed, the notion of having that ritual where everybody's there and has an opportunity to really say what's going on in their lives, and for me to ask, or each other to ask, is a healthy, good thing in this ever more stressful world. So one of the few things that's non-negotiable in our family is, of course, there's exceptions when, one of us has to go work in the evening, can't come home or on a business trip. But in general, unless there's a good reason, the dinner is one of our family traditions, and so I need you here. So that's kind of what I would do with that. Okay, so now let's say the kid is hearing you having sex behind the closed doors, and the kid is asking, what were you doing with the door closed, making all those noises? So, because it could be scary to some kids, depending on how loud you are, probably say something like, actually, mommy and daddy are having fun. We're having a very pleasurable experience, but it's private. And sometimes we make a little noise, but everything is okay. That's probably all I would say. And if my kid was, say, 14 or 15, I'd probably say something like, well, as you know, mommies and daddies have sex. That's why we got you. And it's a lovely part of life. And so that's why we do it. Enough said. Change the topic. I'd probably do something like that. Okay, let's say the kid now says, the next ticklish situation is, why do I need to know all that crap in school? Why do I need to know the cause of the Peloponnesian War, quadratic equations, stochastic processes, the intricacies of Shakespeare? It's garbage. Why do I need to know that crap? My best answer is, I can understand why you'd feel that way. I used to feel that way myself. And while it's probably correct, you may never solve a quadratic equation for the rest of your life. You're not going to, I don't sense you're going to be a chemist. You're probably not going to be looking at stochastic, these are random processes. You probably will never look at those. And even the cause of the Peloponnesian War, I know the teachers say you need to know it because we learn the lessons of history so we prevent from doing it again. I'm not sure I buy all that crap. And the intricacies of Shakespeare, I'm not so sure how much understanding Shakespearean language or those huge concepts are going to matter that much, although probably it will help. Shakespeare really does deal with the big issues of life what is the meaning of life? Love, hate, murder, jealousy, anger, all those emotions. And so if you can learn at least enough of the damn language, and I know I use damn language, so I'm appearing empathetic, you have a nice exposure to some of those issues, and some of his language is really beautiful if you can get into it. Can you necessarily? I must admit, I don't go to Shakespearean plays because I don't, understand the language a lot of times. But there's a larger reason why you got to learn this crap, and it's not just for the grade. And at the risk of sounding like a fuddy-duddy, there's so much that all of us have to do in life that we don't like to, but we have to. And we need the discipline to stay with it, to be organized, to not procrastinate. And we don't know. Some of the stuff that we're going to learning could be of great value. We may even improve our thinking skills, our writing skills, our reading skills, which are important. So while I sure can understand why you're not excited about learning about simultaneous equations and deriving the area of a parabola, ultimately in the end, it's probably wise. And notice I'm saying probably, because there are some people who would be wiser to say, the hell with school, I'm going to do my learning outside. But, I hate to, it's scary for me to say that to my son or daughter, because so often people who don't do much school end up struggling. But if you really succeed, they find that time is better spent learning and experiencing outside of the school setting. So in my usual spirit of being completely honest with you, I'm sharing the full range of thoughts. Okay, so that's how I would deal with that. And the last one I want to talk about is a kid with drugs. It could be tobacco, it could be alcohol, marijuana, what they call party drugs, whatever, cocaine. So I'd probably say something like, well, I've talked about this earlier with regard to cheating. I think it's anyway. So I think I also talked about drugs earlier with regard to a spouse. So I think I'm not going to repeat that here. In any case, those are my thoughts about how I would handle ticklish situations. Again, I reiterate that it's going to vary with the situation and the people, and that these are at best an initial starting place. Maybe there's some nuggets you might derive from this. So in any case, as always, down below you see you can give a thumbs up or thumbs down, or a comment, which I will welcome. Of course, I welcome the thumbs down a little less often, but I accept it. I'd rather have an honest thumbs down than a BS thumbs up. And there's a share button, so if you find this worthy, it's long, 28 minutes. It's the longest one I've done. Worthy of sharing, of course, I welcome you doing that so that my efforts have broader impact. But in any event, I do thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko.